Hello everybody, Ben here again, back for a special edition of my 7 Tips episode because today I'm going to review this book, Captivology, The Science of Capturing People's Attention. This book is pretty badass. It's not really a marketing book, but coming from a marketer's frame of reference, as what I'll describe in this book, I tend to look and think of things in the marketing perspective. So this book has 7 triggers that people can use to get people to pay attention to them, or 7 triggers basically that we pay attention to in general as a human. So they go automaticity, automaticity, there's a $10 word for you, framing, disruption, rewards, mystery, reputation, and acknowledgement. So I'll quickly kind of go through them and kind of let you know how each one relates to marketing and sales. Die, fruit fly. So number 1, automaticity. It talks about basically how we're wired to see contrasts, different colors. Like, for example, on a landing page, if you make your buy now or download button red or orange or yellow instead of green, where our eyes are naturally drawn to that, and there's different biological reasons, which I'm not going to get into. And so basically it's different colors that we're drawn to, different sounds, different, basically contrast. We like high contrast things. So that's automaticity. It's basically biological interest. And to kind of back this up a bit further, this book describes 3 levels of attention. So you have they describe it like a bonfire. So you have your kindling, which is brief attention, and then kind of medium attention, and then your long-term attention. And these different triggers kind of correlate to different levels of attention. So automaticity is good for that immediate kind of lowest level attention. It could be just like, oh, what's that? And then back to whatever you're doing. So the next one is the framing trigger. And basically the framing trigger is broken down to 2 parts. The framing trigger itself, which is how you present information in a way that gets people to respond differently. So an example is a video where they showed the watchers a car crash, and they basically, the way they presented their question changed how people responded. So when they said, what speed do you think these cars crashed into each other? People guess between 50 to 60 kilometers an hour, or miles if you're in the States. But if they said, what speed did these cars bump into each other? They said, oh, 20 to 30. So that's the framing trigger. And the frame of reference refers to our view on the world. It's super hard to change. And as a marketer, your job is to kind of figure out where your audience's frame of reference is right now and work with that rather than trying to change it. Because as they explain in the book, our brains are kind of selfish when it comes to using resources, specifically changing our minds if we don't do it. So basically there's 2 methods that he talks about in this book on how to kind of approach this frame of reference thing. One is adaptation. So basically adapting to someone's frame of reference, there's 3 parts. The first part comes down to knowing how stressed your audience is. If they're super high stressed, they're not going to pay attention to you. So you want to, say you're sending out an advertising campaign, you want to figure out when your target audience is at their least stressed. So maybe that's in the middle of the week, maybe that's after they just eaten dinner. That's part 1. Part 2 is basically, part 2 is kind of their cultural norms and traditions. So if they have any kind of weird cultural norms and traditions that you don't know about, you have to kind of keep that in mind if you're advertising across, internationally. And part 3 is making sure that your message doesn't have something that they'll immediately object to. So this kind of relates back to the book Breakthrough Advertising. It talks about this kind of concept called gradualization. So what that means is basically getting people, coming to them at a point that they would agree with you and then building towards your argument, if that makes sense. So maybe you're trying to sell, I don't know, new pants. And basically you say, hey, do you like pants? And like, yes, I do. Perfect. Well, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's a terrible example. Moving on. Next one is disruption trigger. The disruption trigger, you may know this in marketing speak, it's sometimes described as a pattern interrupt. So there's a famous video in the dating niche where you open the video and the first thing you see is a goldfish, and they say, hey, this goldfish is going to help you get laid. So something like that, something that violates our expectations, is a disruption trigger. And again, that's good for like the immediate attention grabbing. It's like, whoa, what's this? And if it's relevant to your audience, then you can kind of build that attention with your interest by building interest in, relating it to whatever you're selling. And the next one is the rewards trigger. And a rewards trigger is kind of like basic incentives. You have your extrinsic motivators and your intrinsic motivators. So your extrinsic motivator is something, it could be a discount, say you're selling something. He says in this book that extrinsic motivators, like saving money or making money or whatever, they're good for getting people's attention once or twice, but after that they're not as good. So what he suggests is to try to get people intrinsically motivated. That could be, and there's like a huge list of things that people are intrinsically motivated to do, like vengeance, social contact, power, all these different things. There's literally like 20 of them. That's people are intrinsically motivated to use these things to feel satisfaction. So that's the rewards trigger. The next one's the reputations trigger. He said this is kind of goes back to Robert Cialdini's book Influence. There's like authority. Basically, the reputation trigger is we pay attention to people with authority, experts, and the crowd. So authority, there's three different kinds of authority. There's like the government, there's like doctors, and then there's charismatic authority, which you can help, like, I'm probably not demonstrating very much here, but as a marketer, that's something you can take advantage of. The thing about these reputation triggers is that they basically turn off your brain. So if you see someone, if your doctor tells you, hey, like you have cancer of the ass, you have to take this medication and do all this, you're gonna be like, okay, I'm doing it. So that's how that works. Where are we? So we went through automaticity, framing, rewards, disruption, reputation. Next one's a mystery, of course. Mystery, they call these open loops in advertising. So what you want to do is create little mysteries. And in this book, he describes mystery triggers in 4 parts. So you have your suspense, which is kind of that feeling of tension you get in your body. It's kind of uncomfortable, and we typically want it to be gone. If you think of the movie, or the show, sorry, Lost, it's a great example of using the mystery triggers, suspense. It's a pleasurable feeling in us, but it's also like agitating. So if basically how it works is by adding little clues that get people interested, they're going to continue paying attention to you. It's kind of how you build the longer term attention. So next you have emotional buy-in. So the example they use in this book is the Malaysia flights that went missing there. I think there's actually 2 of them. I can't remember the exact name of the flight, but people were emotionally bought in because of the human interest parts of this story, like what's going to happen to their families, are they going to find these people, like did they die? Sorry, it's freezing in here, so I'm just going to start like sniveling all over the place. So you have the emotional buy-in. The next part is the cliffhangers. Basically, going back to Lost, these cliffhangers, people are like, it like frustrates us. We're like, we have to know what happened. It's just a weird part of human nature that we hate it. And yeah, to give you a cliffhanger, there's a fourth part of the mystery trigger, and I'm not going to tell you what it is because I can't remember right now. And finally, the last trigger is the acknowledgement trigger. There's acknowledgements broken down into three parts. So you got recognition, validation, and empathy. So recognition is basically, hey, your name's Ben. I know you. Okay, someone knows you. That feels nice to us. We like that. Number two is validation. Is, hey, you're special. You're really good at marketing. It's like, ooh, I like that. People crave validation. They call social media networks validation networks. So maybe the reason why I'm doing this video is to feel a tiny hit of validation. Who knows? And finally, empathy is when someone knows that you feel what they feel. So a lot of marketers say, and copywriters specifically say, that the most powerful thing you can do for your prospects is to make them feel like you understand them. So if in your copy, if you can kind of describe their problems better than they can describe them, people are like, wow, this guy really gets me. That's huge. There's a classic saying that nobody cares what you know until they know how much you care, and that kind of goes back to this acknowledgement trigger. And basically, that's the most powerful thing out there. So just quickly run through them. You got automaticity, framing, disruption, reputation, rewards, mystery, and acknowledgement. I'll add the fourth part of the mystery trigger into the description below this because I'm an asshole and I totally forgot. I'm sure it's really interesting though, and you're going to want to look for that. And until the next time, I'll see you soon. I had fun making this video for you.